want to welcome everyone for joining us. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Today we are here once again to examine the Biden-Harris administration's decision to effectively ban liquefied natural gas, or LNG, exports to non-free trade agreement countries. On January 26th this year, the administration announced that it would be pausing pending decisions on export permitting for LNG to non-FTA countries. This surprise decision was yet another example of this administration's efforts to kill American independence and American energy independence. This is, let's make no mistake about it, this is an effective ban. One person's ban is another person's pause. But this committee has been conducting oversight to understand what led to the administration's decision. Unfortunately, the administration has refused to be transparent. On April 18th of this year, the subcommittee held a hearing with Assistant Secretary Brad Crabtree. At our hearing, Mr. Crabtree testified that the new department analysis to evaluate whether additional exports were in the public interest was, and I quote, well underway, unquote. A few weeks later, on May 23rd, Secretary Granholm appeared before our full committee. Secretary assured the committee that the study would be completed and the ban would be lifted during the first quarter of 2025. Since the ban was instituted, energy companies investing in new LNG export projects have struggled to navigate an uncertain future. Because what they're looking for, as any business is looking for, is certainty and stability so they can invest and create, incidentally, high-paying American jobs. The holding pattern imposed by the ban has led to a significant number of project delays, high regulatory and legal costs, and a great deal of uncertainty for the workforces and communities supporting these large-scale, capital-intensive projects. Research by the National Association of Manufacturers found that nearly 1 million jobs would be in jeopardy over the next 2 decades should the ban remain in place. So how did we get here? And who was really responsible for the decision? The motivations appear to be entirely political, and that's very unfortunate. Reports indicate that before the ban, the White House met with activists and TikTok influencers, not making that up, who were adamant that the administration take radical steps to address climate change and eliminate fossil fuels. John Podesta, the senior advisor to the President for International Climate Policy, engaged in these meetings, calling into question what information the administration relied upon to impose the export ban and risk the ban's significant economic and national security implications. Ongoing FOIA litigation led to an organization called Government Accountability and Oversight, sought to uncover information supplied to the Department of Energy headquarters before the January 24 decision. And as it turns out, there may have already been a 2023 study in existence that the department kept under wraps and is still fighting to withhold. It appears possible that when the information the department had did not fit the narrative pushed by the White House, that information was buried in an attempt to clear the way for a more politically favorable analysis. This administration has been steadfast in its efforts to cripple American independence. After and hiding inconvenient facts from the public to support radical activists is yet another example of these efforts. The U.S. LNG exports are crucial not only to American independence, but also amidst a fragile geopolitical environment. From the Israel-Hamas war to the Russian invasion of Ukraine to the growing threats posed by an ever-aggressive China, countries across the world have heightened awareness of their own energy reliance. The U.S. plays a significant role in helping these countries meet their future energy demand. Withholding our LNG potential simply to appease climate extremists fails not only to help our allies, it doesn't help our citizens here at home either, and who incidentally work tirelessly to keep the power on, not only in this country, but around the world. The incoming Trump administration should reverse course on these short-sighted actions and usher in a new era of U.S. energy leadership. Reports show that President-elect Trump plans to lift the Biden-Harris LNG export ban and increase American energy production early in his administration. I'm concerned, however, about the reports that the Biden-Harris administration is rushing to complete its final study and skew the record before the incoming Trump administration can undo the damage already done. I want to thank Mr. Crabtree for appearing to testify here today. Senior Advisor to the President, John Podesta, declined to participate in today's hearing despite our invitation. And there's a chair for him. If he's watching, he's welcome to come anytime. We'd love to have him. This is unfortunate, his absence, considering there's many questions that this committee believes he could help answer. I urge the White House to preserve their records and ensure them that we will be obtaining the information we seek one way or another, particularly after the 20th of January. I now recognize the ranking member for purposes of making an opening statement.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our Assistant Secretary for being here with us today. As was mentioned, this is a rehash of a topic that we've already covered in this subcommittee. And in fact, we've already had 2 hearings on gas stoves, 2 hearings on how the government has forced electric vehicles, and now a second hearing on this 1-year pause reviewing applications for LNG exports. This is a politically manufactured non-issue. This is actually not a ban. This is about using the best available economic analysis and science to understand how LNG exports affect American consumer markets, how they affect the price of oil and gas here in the United States, how they affect prices for consumers here in the United States, and in light of supply and demand issues, especially with foreign wars, with constraints on gas exports in other countries, and other impacts, including climate change and social justice and environmental impacts, what the implications are for expanding our capacity. I think any good business would want a good, sound economic analysis. And if the United States is a business, as we know it is, it's in the business of making sure that the American taxpayers get a good return on any investment that we make or any sale that we get from American resources, then it is who of us to do our due diligence to make sure that the energy that is being produced here in the United States, the infrastructure that the United States is investing in, and the places in which that infrastructure goes does not have an undue impact on our economy, on American families, on oil and gas prices, and on the environment and the global climate crisis. And that's really what this all comes down to. So this is about modernizing and understanding the state of play, especially after we've come out of a historic pandemic and global disturbances in international gas markets, to understand what's going on. Which seems pretty reasonable, but oftentimes, in this committee, things get spun in a way that sounds like there's some vast conspiracy theory. And I think it's important to just be real with the American people. We are literally 2 weeks out from adjourning for the holidays. On January 20th, we'll have a new administration. They've made very clear, it was just stated in the opening statement, that their intention is to vastly expand LNG exports. And that has nothing to do with American energy security. That has everything to do with expanding opportunities to sell American oil and gas overseas so that American companies can profit from the pumping that they're doing here in the United States. We are energy secure. And in fact, as somebody who also comes from an oil and gas state, we have amongst the highest oil and gas pumping that we've ever seen in American history right now. In fact, just in our backyard. So this is not about energy security. And before I came to Congress, I was actually a staffer on the Senate Energy Committee. And I marveled often as a staffer when we would see these industry-led hearings come before the committee. And you always wonder, what are the conversations that were had with industry before they decided to hold hearings like this? Because it's clearly in the service of creating a congressional record so that when the Trump administration comes in, there's some legal and possibly congressional teeth to whatever fight these private companies are hoping to take on. So I think it's important to be clear-eyed about what this hearing actually is and pull back the curtain a little bit, and to also be clear about what it is that we're actually talking about. This is not a ban. The Department of Energy is updating their data and analysis, working with experts from our national laboratories, and it's an important part of the process for looking at additional permit applications. And this is just part of doing business and being a responsible business. And so this is a bit of a witch hunt, especially in the final days of this Congress and of the administration. I think it's really important that we have the Assistant Secretary here today to talk about what the Biden administration has done to address American energy security. And in fact, we have amongst the highest energy security we've ever had in American history. And, you know, prices are going down. Manufacturing is going up, jobs are going up, and we're having a renaissance here in the United States in domestic production and manufacturing. And so I think it would be a dang shame to see it get dismantled in the coming months, because we know that it's stimulating economic opportunity, it's creating thousands of jobs, it's helping millions of Americans, it's bringing down costs, and this is really about trying to pump up profits for private corporations, not about caring for the people of this country. So I look forward to hearing from the Assistant Secretary. I applaud the Department of Energy's efforts to create a fact-based policy document that we can use to help plan for our industry exports and to understand the economic and environmental implications of what we do as we are, as a country, figuring out how we want to handle this industry and its implications. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Today we are joined by Mr. Brad Crabtree, who serves as the Assistant Secretary for the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Fossil Fuel and Carbon Management. Mr. Crabtree previously testified before this subcommittee in April of this year. We also invited Senior Advisor to the President for International Climate Policy, John Podesta, who declined the committee's invitation to participate. I want to thank you, Mr. Crabtree, for your willingness to join us here today. As you can see, we only had 50% success rate, so I'm glad you're here. Without objection, Representative Higgins of Louisiana and Representative Pfluger from Texas are waived onto the subcommittee for the purpose of questioning the witness at today's hearing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witness will please stand and raise his right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please sit. Sit. Let the record show that the witness answered in the affirmative. We appreciate, sir, you being here today and look forward to hearing your testimony. Let me remind the witness that we have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral comments to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button. You know the drill. And 4 minutes of green, 1 minute of yellow, and then red if you could wrap it up. I now recognize Mr. Crabtree for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again. And Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Stansbury, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and to testify before the subcommittee. I look forward to discussing the Department of Energy's updates to the analyses that underpin our decisions on on applications to export liquefied natural gas to non-free trade agreement countries. Let me begin by emphasizing that there has never been a ban on LNG exports. The U.S. is the #1 exporter of LNG worldwide and of natural gas, and DOE has authorized every operating project, every project under construction, and a number of additional projects to export U.S. natural gas as LNG to those countries with which we do not have a free trade agreement. Current exports reached a new high this year, averaging over 12 billion cubic feet per day, and exports are expected to reach 14 billion cubic feet per day next year as new projects come online. Once all authorized projects currently under construction do come online, our export capacity is set to reach over 26 billion cubic feet per day. That's more than double our current export level. What this means is that by just 2030, half a decade, U.S. export capacity will exceed any other country by over 40%, and that takes all announced global capacity additions in other countries into account. Our total level of non-FTA exports already authorized goes well beyond these numbers, with another 22 billion cubic feet of export capacity authorized, but not yet having reached a final financial investment decision. In short, the program I lead has authorized over 48 billion cubic feet in exports to non-FTA countries, 4 times our actual current LNG export levels and nearly 45% of our current domestic natural gas production. By any measure, our export posture is strong and will grow dramatically during the remainder of this decade, regardless of future export approvals. With that context in mind, DOE needs to fully understand how additional authorized exports could impact our economy, community, energy prices for domestic consumers and manufacturers, international partners, and the environment. To that end, earlier this year, DOE announced that we are undertaking a review of the economic and environmental analyses, again, that underpin our public interest determinations. We also announced that we would pause final authorizations pending applications while we conducted the review. In 2011 and 2012, DOE commissioned 2 studies to examine the domestic economic impact of U.S. LNG exports. In December 2012, DOE published the first 2 economic studies. During that update, as with this one, DOE temporarily deferred its review of all pending non-FTA applications. Beginning in 2014, DOE undertook studies to evaluate the environmental impacts associated with LNG exports because the existing analysis did not account for the latest scientific understanding of the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. The most recent economic study, published in 2018, considered the total volume of non-FTA exports authorized at that time equivalent to 21.35 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day, and the additional volume of LNG requested for export in the then pending applications. DOE provided notice of each of these studies in the Federal Register and solicited public comment. This associated public comment process has been a valuable part of our decision-making ever since. I would note that one key difference between those reviews and the current update is we have seen the pivotal role U.S. LNG plays in safeguarding global energy security. We have also seen periods during which U.S. LNG exports had a noticeable influence on domestic prices, especially when demand outpaced supply following the post-COVID economic recovery. And we are seeing how LNG exports affect communities near liquefaction sites in both positive and negative ways. Finally, over the past several years, we have learned a lot more about greenhouse gas emissions from the natural gas supply chain and what actions can and should be taken to mitigate them. The forthcoming update of our economic and environmental analysis is both robust and comprehensive, and we expect to release the final study at the middle of by mid-December for a 60-day public comment period. Mr. Chairman, DOE is proud of its strong record of relying on the most up-to-date and robust data and analyses when making our public interest determinations. Without these updated analyses, applicants whose non-FTA export applications are approved by DOE could face likely legal challenges alleging that DOE improperly relied on outdated analysis in making its public interest determinations. This update underway ensures that DOE will rely on the most up-to-date and robust data and analyses to the benefit not only of U.S. consumers and the nation's economic competitiveness, but also to the applicants themselves who are seeking non-FTA export authorizations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. It's unfortunate, I know. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. I think it's unfortunate that Mr. Podesta has declined our invitation to appear before the subcommittee today. These are questions that I would have asked him. I would have asked him how many times did he meet with TikTok influencers on climate issues leading up to or following the announcement of the LNG export ban. Would have asked him what if the White House was relying on TikTok influencers for policy advice when it pushed the LNG ban on the DOE. I'd like to know, did the White House vet individuals and activists from organizations that it spoke to about the LNG ban? Did they vet them for foreign influence or sponsorship? Did the Biden-Harris administration make the decision to institute the ban on the LNG exports in order to appease climate activists or in response to foreign influence or other conflicts of interest? It's also concerning that Mr. Podesta's brother, Tony, is known to have lobbied for foreign LNG companies, including one co-owned by Qatar's state-run energy company. Over the past 11 months since the announcement of the pause, Qatar has secured long-term LNG export contracts, invested in export infrastructure, and increased capacity while the United States falls behind competitively. I would also like to enter into the record an article by the Washington Free Beacon detailing these findings. Without objection, so ordered. So do these represent a significant conflict of interest? I think the American people have a right to know, and we don't know if we can't have those questions answered. It's unfortunate, and I had to burn 2 of my minutes to asking questions I knew I wasn't going to get answers to. But we do have a witness that is here today, Mr. Crabtree, and I want to thank you for showing up. And Mr. Crabtree, as you know, the committee sent a letter to your department on the 23rd of October this year requesting information regarding a potential draft study of LNG exports that was completed in 2023. Are you familiar with this study, and what can you share about any analysis that was done prior to the decision to pause?
I'm not aware, sir. I've not been presented with the document, so I'm not aware of what you're referring to. What I can say about the process we've undertaken is the discussions of potentially updating the analyses were occurring at the staff level when I joined the administration. And by early 2023, we were having discussions about updating the analysis. And work began at that time. And there are many facets to this analysis. Each of them involves modeling. Each of them has a qualitative and quantitative analytical component. And so I imagine what you're referring to is early documentation of that sort, but a complete study did not exist in 2020.
Did the White House, via Mr. Podesta or anyone else, ever advise or suggest to you or anyone on your team about outcomes, on what outcomes the final study or any prior study needed to support?
No. I had no interaction that I recall with the White House.
Have you ever had any pushback on any directives given by the White House as it relates to the future of U.S. LNG exports?
No.
Okay. So what I think is very important for folks to understand is these FTA countries, we only have an agreements with 20, and there's roughly 195 countries in the world. So 175 countries aren't part of the FTA. So when you have a ban or a pause, it greatly impacts our ability not only to keep high-paying American jobs, but also securing our the energy security of our allies. I had two different European allies come into our office begging us to have the president lift this, whatever you want to call it, the ban or pause, and that they ostensibly were in our office for different reasons. Mr. Crabtree, how many permits? Because Democrats on the committee are claiming this was a pause and not a ban. So how many permits have been issued since January 26th, 2024 to non-FTA countries?
We have issued a permit to the New Fortress Energy Altamira project was issued in August.
Okay, so the answer to that question would be one?
One.
One in a year. And did they apply for a 5-year or a 20-year lease?
Applied for a 20-year.
Okay, were they granted the 20-year lease?
No, we granted them a 5-year because until we update our analysis, we need to be able to substantiate that standard.
But you could do both. You could be doing a study and also having an American company export a vital resource, because they're either going to get it from New Mexico or Texas or some other state in our union, or they're going to get it from Moscow. I'd far rather have them get it from us.
Just as the DOE did in 2012, we chose to pause our consideration of applications.
Oh, I know you did, and I think that was misguided. I think it was a big mistake. Now, this company that you issued the 5-year and not the 20-year permit to, there was also an inclusion where they couldn't just ask for, after 5 years, they couldn't ask for an extension. They had to wait 2 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think that's just a very short-sighted and misguided policy. Thank you again for coming, though. I yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes of questions. I yield to our friend Ms. Brown from Ohio for her 5 minutes of questions.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Biden-Harris administration has lived up to its promise to strengthen American energy independence like never before, while simultaneously combating climate change. As we've discussed in previous hearings in this subcommittee in 2023, the United States achieved its highest level of energy production ever. This is a remarkable achievement, especially after a global pandemic and Russia's war in Ukraine. In fact, the 4 years of Biden-Harris administration will mark 4 consecutive years of liquid natural gas production increases. The administration's efforts have solidified the United States as the world's #1 LNG exporter. And LNG exports are expected to continue increasing through the end of the decade. So, Assistant Secretary Crabtree, thank you for joining us again. I know we've discussed much of this before, but it's worth re-emphasizing since my colleagues on the other side of the aisle often overlook the success of the Biden-Harris administration. First, is the United States still the world's largest exporter of liquid natural gas?
Yes, and we will continue to be the largest exporter in 2030 based on current approvals and commitments by other countries.
Thank you. And Assistant Secretary Crabtree, can you walk us through how we as a country have gotten to this level of liquid natural gas production under the Biden-Harris administration?
Well, the significant approvals made by the Department of Energy for authorized exports, those projects have continued to come online. I mentioned at the outset, we're currently exporting 12 billion cubic feet a day. With additional capacity coming online, we anticipate 14 billion cubic feet next year. I would note that in 2018 or 2019, we were at about 3 to 4 billion cubic feet. U.S. LNG exports exploded over a 10-year period. It's one of the most remarkable transformations in history in terms of energy. We started from a dead stop in 2015 to now being the largest exporter in the world, and we will be doubling those exports essentially by the end of the decade.
And you touched on this a little bit. How has the Department of Energy responded to the global crisis to ensure we have remained in this top spot and continue to supply LNG to our allies?
Well, let me note that it takes many years to develop, permit, and finance a LNG project. And when our office approves an authorization, we give that company 7 years to begin exports. And we know from the experience going back to the first projects in 2015 until now, these projects can take many years. In fact, there are many projects that have failed to commence exports within 6 years of being authorized by our office. And as many have sought actual extensions of that time period. So the key thing that has been misunderstood and needs to be understood is our decisions have had no impact and will have no impact on the flow of natural gas, not over in future months, but years, because of all of the authorizations and the projects that have a final investment decision and are under construction. U.S. supply will continue to grow. We now export about 60% of our natural gas goes directly to our European partners in their need following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And that is more than about 2.5 times what Russia exports with pipelines and LNG. And it is roughly nearly half of European demand for natural gas is satisfied by U.S. LNG exports.
And what does that mean for the average American?
Well, what that means for the average American is that our country is playing a very important geostrategic role in supplying energy to Europe at a critical time and supporting our allies and their economic viability. And we are sending a U.S. export overseas, which provides American jobs and strengthens our position as a country. And what we're doing with this update of our analysis is to make sure, having authorized again 4 times our current exports, we are now taking this step of, as the program has done in both the Trump administration and in the Obama administration, update the analysis so that any future decisions in authorizing exports incorporate the best science and the best understanding of what the domestic and international economic, environmental, and other impacts will be.
My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes our friend from South Carolina, Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assistant Secretary Crabtree, in ongoing FOIA litigation, the Department of Energy has identified approximately 97 documents related to LNG export, to the LNG export pause, but has resisted releasing them. Why? What is the rationale for not releasing those documents?
It is my understanding that our team that works on document production has been in cooperative engagement with the committee. They committed to 4 document distributions, which have occurred so far. And the next one, I understand, is planned for Friday. My understanding is it's about 2,000 or so pages of documentation. I am not part of the process of documentation or FOIAs, and so I can't speak to the details of that process. In my role, I have no involvement in it. But if you feel that the department has not been responsive to the committee, I'm happy to take any specific concerns back to that team.
Will you commit to releasing those documents to this committee? I mean, so we've done 4. You're doing another one Friday. That's 5 out of, what, 97 will you commit to releasing those documents?
I will commit to meeting our obligations under document production. I am not part of the team that does that, and so
Well, you prepared for this hearing today, did you not?
I was invited to this hearing not to speak about document production, but
No,
to
but you did-
represent
you did
the
prepare
natural
for the
gas
hearing.
program and its export authorization.
Well, but your interactions with Congress and this particular committee requesting these documents, this probably came up in preparation, did it not?
What I've shared with you came up in preparation,
Okay,
yes,
so-
but I am not involved in that
but there is
program.
no-
I'm not going to speak to something I'm not involved
Well,
in.
I understand that, but like, there's no, if you prepared for this hearing today, you didn't just wake up and waltz in here. I don't understand the rationale that you don't have anything to do with it, hands off, and now, when we ask for these things, you're unable to answer the most basic questions about production of documents.
Sir, there's another document, we've undertaken 4 document productions, and there's another one scheduled for Friday. I'm happy to take very specific concerns back. I'm not going to speak to something I do not have any involvement in.
Well, hopefully that happens, but as the chairman indicated, we'll get them one way or another. Reports indicate that the Department of Energy relied on a study by Robert Howarth, which has been discredited by the Breakthrough Institute for its flawed methodology. Why was such a contested study given weight in this decision to pause LNG exports?
The work of Dr. Howarth played no role in the decision to undertake the update of our analyses. I don't know Mr. Howarth. My team has not interacted with him, nor have I. We have, at the National Energy Technology Lab, which is part of the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management that I represent, has the world-class recognized life cycle analysis team. When we release the study mid-December, you will see that there is an entire component to the study on life cycle analysis. It has a methodology. That methodology is completely different than the work of Mr. Howarth. I would note that there is a wide range of opinion in the life cycle analysis academic community, very wide range.
Were other opinions taken into consideration?
We
and not
take
just-
all opinions into consideration. We listen to the academic community, we hear from industry, we hear from scientific and technical organizations, NGOs. My point is that Dr. Howarth's study played no role in our decision-making, and our methodology is entirely different.
Okay. The pause obviously hindered LNG export or the terminal development, delayed infrastructure projects, jeopardized jobs in the energy sector. How does the Department of Energy justify these economic disruptions in light of the clear benefits of LNG exports to American workers and communities?
I'm very sorry. I got to, can you repeat the?
How does the Department of Energy justify the disruptions, the economic disruptions, in light of the clear benefits of LNG exports to the American workers and the communities?
This won't surprise you that I don't agree with that assertion. The projects that are affected by the pause are 7. They are 5.6 billion cubic feet of capacity. We have authorized 48 billion cubic feet. If you talk to executives in the industry, they are struggling to find workers. They are struggling with EPC contracts. There is so much project development going on the Gulf Coast that they can't keep up. And the time frame that for the pause that we instituted is short enough that I do not agree with that assertion that there's been disruption to the development of U.S. projects, or certainly not.
I think others would have that a difference of opinion. Last question before my time wraps up. What steps is the Department of Energy taking to ensure that companies, domestic companies, can compete globally against nations like Qatar, Russia, which have capitalized on this pause that we have in this country?
So, again, I do not agree that they capitalized on this pause. Qatar's major announcement of increased capacity was years in the making, sir. I've met with Minister Al-Kabi himself and his team. They are very strategic. These are multi-billion-dollar investments that the decisions are made after years of work. So the idea that Qatar would be so unsophisticated that they would make that sort of a commitment based on our temporary decision is just not credible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes our friend from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Crabtree, my Republican colleagues have frequently mischaracterized the Department of Energy's actions regarding the brief pause on reviewing new liquefied natural gas export permit applications. The truth is actually so much simpler. The Biden-Harris administration recognized significant changes in economic, global, national security, and environmental considerations for the liquefied natural gas industry. These changes prompted the need for an updated study to better inform decision makers on new LNG permits. Mr. Crabtree, can you give us a quick overview of the significant changes to the liquefied natural gas market that prompted a new study?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the changes are multiple. One is, again, as I've already noted, the sheer scale of the growth of the industry here in the United States from 0 in 2015 to 12 billion cubic feet averaging this year and expected 14 billion cubic feet of exports. That is unprecedented growth of an industry from a dead start. And as far as our reasoning, so we, as it's been noted by the chairman, that natural gas provides a very important role, and the ranking member as well, a very important role in our domestic economy. We are a major global manufacturer and industrial producer in the world today. Natural gas at a low cost is of great benefit to our economy. We also have households which depend on natural gas for heating and electricity. And so we need to make sure that as we grow this, as this industry has grown, that we are making decisions about future exports. We've authorized over half of our domestic natural gas production for export. So we want to make sure that going forward that we're, one, making sure that we're supplying our allies, which we're doing, and two, that we're making sure that we continue to maintain low prices and our domestic industrial competitiveness and also affordability for households. When we were faced with the decision of whether to pause our analysis and to pause our applications and update our analysis, we were looking at incoming applications that would have put our authorizations for export at levels that had been higher than the DOE has ever even modeled. And so this was an appropriate time for us to take a step back when all this development is in the pipeline and happening on the Gulf Coast, to take a look at what would be the implications of even higher export levels from an economic, jobs, of domestic prices, environmental, energy security, all those aspects. Do a science-based technical analysis so that future decisions about yet additional exports which are pending could be made responsibly.
Well, Mr. Crabtree, how will the new study lead to more informed decisions on new LNG permit applications, and how will that benefit Americans at large?
Well, so first of all, the current economic analysis we're working with is 6 years old, and as I had mentioned, we were only exporting 3 to 4 billion cubic feet per day when that study was completed during the Trump administration. And our latest environmental analysis is 5 years old. So we will now have more up-to-date analysis about the economic effects of increased export levels and the environmental effects. And the environmental effects are not only greenhouse gas emissions, but upstream and downstream effects of natural gas production related to export on communities, for example.
Well, Mr. Crabtree, will the new study also help LNG companies to have applications before the department?
Congressman, I appreciate that question because I think this is an important point that's getting lost. In 2012, the Obama administration undertook economic analysis of given levels of liquefied natural gas exports. When the Trump administration authorized exports, the Trump administration relied on the Obama-era analysis. During the Biden administration, in terms of the approvals that have been made by the Biden administration, then the team that I oversee in our Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management relied on the economic analysis from 2018 that was undertaken during the Trump administration. So there's a regular precedent of relying across administrations on the analysis of this program. And I would note that, and this is really important, in 2017, the Sierra Club challenged 4 of our export authorizations. This was during the Trump administration, and the DC court upheld those 4 authorizations, and it was in part based on the strength of the economic and environmental analysis that our program has consistently undertaken.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes our good friend from Texas, Mr. Pfluger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to wave on. Mr. Crabtree, good to see you again. I'll start by saying I think the American public spoke pretty loud and clear on November 5th. So this is a great hearing, but we also have a mandate from the American public to actually unleash American energy. And that was at the top of the ballot, I believe, in every state. I want to get into some specifics, and I'll start by saying, was any analysis conducted by the administration prior to the January 26th announcement, specifically between January 1st, 2023 and October 31st of 2023? And how was it determined, that is, based on what specific factors and evidence, that an updated study was actually needed?
Yes, Congressman, good to see you again. Thank you for that question. You were not here, but earlier I explained that we actually began work on the update in the time frame largely that you suggest. The discussions were actually going on with the career team when I was confirmed and started my work. Those discussions began in earnest in 2023. The thing that I think has been misrepresented in some of the news coverage and comments that have been made is that the analysis is multifaceted. The labs we're working with and the team we have at DOE are working on, there's the domestic GDP and price impacts. There are environmental impacts, both greenhouse gas emissions and other environmental impacts. There's a whole range of things that we're looking at. Each of those areas has its own modeling and its own quantitative and qualitative analysis. So in 2023, there were work products being developed that were not a complete study, but that were part of the process that's been ongoing since then.
Let me jump to that. Have the DOE leadership or anyone in the White House received any reports or results, even if preliminary, of the export study conducted during those first 10 months that you're referring to? And did those reports conclude that there is no credible basis to restrict LNG exports? Is that what the initial report said, that there's no reason to restrict exports?
No, that was not what those reports.
So they said we do need to restrict.
There wasn't a report. There were
But
different
preliminary
work products.
information from the.
Yes, you could not derive that conclusion from that work.
Okay, so was there a conclusion derived that said to the president or the administration that you should restrict LNG?
No,
So why apply?
nor was there one that we should increase it. It was not definitive in that way.
Okay, let me move to the White House involvement.
Sir, I would say it's an iterative process, like most modeling and analysis is. We agreed on assumptions as a team. We worked with our labs on an iterative basis. That's how DOE has done its analysis for years. And I just have to make this point. Across presidential administrations, DOE has been respected as one of the most significant scientific and technical organizations in the world. And when the study comes out mid-December, I think you will agree that this study is very consistent with that tradition.
I think our problem, and the reason that this hearing is probably being held today, is because that science seems to have been departed from, especially when considering the public interest and whether or not it is in the public interest to export LNG when every country around the world is asking for it. The Haworth study, I know my friend Mr. Fry was discussing this. Does DOE reject Haworth's findings?
Our methodology is fundamentally different from that of Mr. Haworth. I had said earlier, I don't know if you were in the room, that our National Energy Technology Lab Life Cycle Analysis team is one of the most distinguished in the world. The work that you will see mid-December for the life cycle analysis is their work, and the work of Mr. Haworth played no role in our decision to proceed with the analysis. And I would note again for the committee that there is a robust debate in the academic life cycle analysis community, as there are in many other academic communities, but DOE and its labs and the career staff do their own work, sir.
So can you say that you reject Haworth's findings?
No, I'm not going to make comments like that because the analysis is coming out mid-December, and I want all of you, industry, environmental organizations, the American public, to evaluate the study as the study when it's publicly available and not based on piecemeal on my comments.
Has the White House directed DOE to finalize the study before January 20th?
No, we committed all along to have this.
So it was Secretary Granholm did this of her own ambition, and the president never asked her to do this?
That's correct.
So I asked her about a year ago. She was the principal advisor to the President of the United States on energy matters, and she could not conclusively say that she was. So who else has led in this study? Can you name the names in Department of Energy?
I'm not, my answer was not in reference to that. It was in reference to this study. And what I'm telling you is Secretary Granholm is the one who made the decision to undertake the update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Chair now recognizes our friend from New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are always interesting journeys into the inner psychic worlds of industry and whatever it is they're trying to get out of these hearings so they can make their case in front of boards and courts and boardrooms. But I like to go back to basics a little bit because I think one of the things that we can do in hearings is to help educate the public. I think for many folks who are not industry experts or not energy nerds like us, they may not even know what exactly LNG is. Why do we export it? Why is the United States the largest exporter of LNG? How did we get here? So I wonder, Assistant Secretary, could you just briefly kind of give us a quick primer on what is LNG? Where does it come from? Why is the U.S. exporting so much of it? Why did we need to do a study about it?
So LNG is natural gas, highly compressed, so compressed that you can take very large volumes of gas and transport it on a ship efficiently, cost-effectively. The technology was really pioneered decades ago by Japan, which has deep energy insecurity because they don't produce their own energy resources. And starting from that Japanese leadership, it has become a major component of global energy production and use. Because it's natural gas, but it can be transported in compressed form, it's very convenient. It can be shipped all over the world. Our industry was financed by the private sector based on long-term contracts. The destinations of those contracts are flexible, so it's been very attractive for investors in the United States and around the world to invest in the development of our liquefaction terminals. U.S. LNG is especially attractive in the global market because of that destination flexibility. The second part of your question, I'm sorry,
I think you're getting at it. One of the things I think that's important to understand, because oftentimes just the kind of economic and production realities of oil and gas production get lost in these conversations. And in New Mexico, similar to Texas, a significant portion of our state's income comes from oil and gas revenues. And so we track it very closely. And one of the things that I think is important to understand for folks who don't track the industry is that we had an exponential increase starting about a decade ago in gas production, especially in the Permian Basin, which is in New Mexico and Texas. And as a result of that and shrinking markets and the inability to offload gas in a timely manner in some cases, and overproduction because there was a lot of new horizontal drilling happening, et cetera, exports became increasingly important because we had extra stuff, right? And so there is an interest right now because there is a tremendous opportunity to increase drilling, which I think is the point that our colleagues across the aisle are making. But it's for the benefit of these private companies. So it is in the interest of these private companies to drill, baby, drill as much as they can produce and export as much as they can produce. But one of the constraining factors is infrastructure to actually get it onto ships and actually send it overseas. And so I think folks who are listening who may not understand the industry and kind of the ebb and flow of oil and gas production may not really kind of understand kind of the economics of what we're talking about here. This is not about American energy security. This is about creating international markets for private industry to sell excess gas that they have. And what the U.S. government government is trying to do under the Biden administration is be responsible so that if industry is going to have a bonanza, which is being driven by international prices and demand, that we do it in a responsible manner, that it doesn't harm American consumers, that it doesn't drive up the cost of our own oil and gas prices, that it doesn't hurt us in our own utility payments, that it doesn't hit us at the pump, and that it doesn't have unintended consequences globally in terms of our geopolitical relationships with other countries, especially as we're facing conflicts and other responsibilities we have to our allies and those who are not our allies. So I think it's just important for folks to understand the context of what this study is. It's one of the most sophisticated modeling exercises. It's not a piece of paper, right? Folks are talking like, oh, they found a dusty piece of paper somewhere in a filing cabinet that they had already wrote and filed away. This is a multi-million-dollar modeling exercise to understand global export markets for gas products that the industry would like the U.S. government to permit and subsidize. And we're trying to figure it out, is it in the public interest to allow this giant bonanza without any guardrails around it? And that's really what this study is about, and that's why the majority is bringing this hearing here, is because industry is asking them to. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes our friend from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Crabtree, are you aware of any of our allies who have publicly supported what is described as the pause?
Both prior to and following our decision to pause consideration of pending applications, I met with a number of my counterparts in importing countries, and there are different views about the pause, but what has been mischaracterized.
No, I'm just asking you which ones. I think publicly supported.
I'm not going to, in a congressional hearing, I'm not going to draw out our individual allies.
I'm not asking you to draw them
Well,
out.
you asked, said which ones.
I said publicly supported, so you're not drawing someone out if you're just echoing their public. I'm just asking you which ones publicly supported the so-called pause. Any?
They also didn't publicly oppose it either. You've had individual policymakers from Europe and East Asia countries on both sides of the debate make public statements. But as far as national governments,
okay, so which ones opposed it?
in my experience, none opposed it. We explained our rationale. We explained how our decision does not affect natural gas
So
exports
nobody
to these
opposed it-
countries until 2030,
Right.
and that will, under current
Okay, so
authorizations,
but
under
you're-
construction, will be doubling our exports.
But
So it was in that
what
context
you're
that we
implying
engaged
is
allies.
that no one opposed it and everyone.
I am not aware of public opposition. There is a range of views, and there
and
is
are-
in this country among individual
Yeah, I get it.
policymakers in those countries, clearly, yes.
But are you aware that anybody publicly supported it? Any?
No, but I'm saying that in
But it's important because what you're implying is that they didn't publicly support it, but behind closed doors, just to me, they were all for it. They just didn't want to say so publicly.
I'm not suggesting that.
Okay, well, as long as you're not suggesting that, let me just move on. There are 97 documents, approximately 97 documents responsive to a FOIA request submitted by the public interest group Government Accountability and Oversight regarding the department's study of LNG exports. Why is the department refusing to release those documents?
Sir, I've already addressed all of this.
I'm sorry if I wasn't here.
No apologies, but I'll try to reiterate briefly.
Okay.
So my understanding, again, is that I'm not part of the documents production team. In the FOIA team at DOE, I'm not part of that process. What I understand from that team is that they have engaged constructively with the committee. They have produced documents on 4 different occasions, and will be doing so again on Friday. That a large
Does that include
and
these
as far as
97 documents?
I can't speak to the 97 documents. I do know that the FOIA request is under litigation, and so I'm not going to speak to something that's under litigation. But in any case, I'm not involved in that process. What I offered to your colleague earlier is that if there are specific concerns about responsiveness or how this is being approached, I'm happy to take that back to the team and have
Let me
follow-up
ask
meeting
you
with
this,
your
Mr.
staff.
Crabtree. 16 states sued the administration, and in response, a federal district court issued a stay against the pause going into effect. But the administration appears in violation of that. Why would that be?
The Department of Energy complies with court orders. We in August, we authorized a non.
So are you saying you're in compliance right now with this federal district court, which issued a stay against the pause?
I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to comment on pending litigation, but what I'm
No,
saying.
I'm just, that's not, the judge issued a stay. It's not pending. He issued a stay against the pause. So is the pause in effect or is it not in effect?
In following the judge's order, the judge's order was in July, and at the end of August, we issued a non-FTA authorization to New Fortress Energy Altamira. And I'm not going to speak to what other activities are underway. Across administrations, this program has not talked about the timing or which specific decisions are forthcoming. I'm not going to change that now.
Let me ask you this. Did the White House meet with TikTok influencers leading up to the pause in LNG exports?
I can't speak to.
Were you involved in any of those meetings?
No, I have
You
no
were not.
involvement
You were not.
whatsoever. I don't even have a TikTok account. I've never
I'm
been
not
on
asking if you
I
do.
know
You don't
aren't,
have
but
to
I
have
mean,
an account.
I've had zero
Zero
engagement.
meetings with a TikTok influencer on
Zero,
the issue,
sir.
right? Okay, and what about with Mr. Bill McKibben? Did you have any meetings with him?
I have never met with Bill McKibben. I know who he is, obviously. I have actually personally never met him, let alone in my time at DOE,
All right.
ever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Yep.
Chair now recognizes our good friend from Colorado, Ms. Boebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Crabtree, 16 states sued the Biden-Harris administration over the LNG pause, in response to which a federal district court judge issued a stay against the LNG pause going into effect. Why are DOE and the Biden-Harris regime continuing with the pause and defying the order issued by the federal district court? And I apologize if you've answered this, but I've not received the answer to this in this hearing yet.
What I said just previously with Congressman Perry is that following the judge's order at the end of August, we issued a non-FTA authorization to New Fortress Energy Altamira, and I'm not going to speak to which further applications in the timing of them, but it is our intent to comply with any judge's order.
If it is your intent, then why isn't it happening?
I'm not going to comment further on something that's in
So
litigation.
we're here as United States representatives in an oversight subcommittee, having a hearing, bringing you in from the administration. We have your salary is appropriated by Congress, and it is our role to have oversight and accountability. And for you to sit here and refuse to answer is really struggling. And in fact, it may be the reason why we have to create a commission now, the Department of Government Efficiency Commission, to have actual oversight and accountability on the administration, on bureaucrats. You know, we used to call that Congress, but when we bring you in here, we're just stonewalled. You have a federal court decision on this stay, and this decision is being defied by the administration, and you refuse to comment on why.
Congresswoman, it is common practice for someone in my role not to comment on something that is subject to pending litigation.
It's common that it's frustrating to the American citizens who pay your salary, and these tax dollars are squandered, rules are defied. Now, Mr. Crabtree, this LNG pause, it's clearly just more pandering to the Green New Deal extremists from this administration. Exporting LNG is actually great for job creation, our economy, and even emissions reductions. No one produces energy cleaner in the entire world than we do here in America. The United States produces the cleanest energy in the world, and if the rest of the world isn't getting energy from us, where are they getting it from? They're getting it from Russia, China, Venezuela, from Iran. Our natural gas is 42% cleaner than Russia's gas. This pause is funding both sides of wars around the world. And we need to stop buying oil and gas from Russia, stop begging OPEC, Venezuela, and even Iran to produce energy for us, and start producing and exporting American energy and creating these American jobs. And I'm confident that the next administration, with President Trump's leadership, will prioritize our natural security and our energy security. And the lack of transparency.
Congresswoman,
Yes, sir.
Congresswoman, this decision to pause our pending applications, as I've said several times in this committee, have not led to stopping 1 BTU of U.S. natural gas exports, because we are currently exporting 12 billion cubic feet.
How many jobs have been lost?
Let me finish. We're about to get to 14 billion cubic feet, and we have authorized.
How many jobs?
Authorized an additional.
Actually, the time is mine. The time is mine.
We have authorized an additional 12 billion cubic feet.
How many
that's under
American jobs have
construction,
been lost?
And there will be no impact on.
Tens of thousands of
No,
American
they
jobs have been
not,
lost.
because-
Absolutely, they have. My district in Colorado has been regulated into poverty because of decisions like this, because of defying federal court rulings. This administration is costing American jobs and livelihood.
Construction of
Mothers are
liquefaction
forced to go to
terminals
work
on the
and get a
Gulf
second
Coast is-
job.
Mr. Crabtree, can you let the member finish, please? And then you can.
Now, the lack of transparency by DOE is demonstrated not only by the DOE's withholding of the FOIA documents that could answer legitimate requests, but also by DOE refusing to give members of Congress answers to their questions about the LNG export pause. And that's what you're doing today. You're refusing to give us answers here that we are trying to seek. Why is the DOE not responding to questions asked by members of Congress?
As I've already said, we have provided documents on 4 different occasions. We'll do so again on Friday to this committee. As far as the litigation, I am not going to speak to that. And I do have to respond to the issue of jobs. Right now on the Gulf Coast, the development of liquefaction terminals is proceeding at such a pace that they're having challenges finding
the time has expired. I do want, did the Biden administration make the decision to institute a pause on LNG exports to appease climate activists?
No.
I believe they did. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Chair now recognizes our good friend from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Mr. Crabtree, you know I am. Do you know I am?
Yes, sir, I do. And good to see you again.
It's my district that's been most severely injured by this pause, which has in itself injured the planet, because we most certainly produce the cleanest LNG and transportable, affordable energy for the entire world to consume. And the pause in permitting has created quite a crisis of continuity on massive projects that require international investment. You know these things. So I'm talking to you right now, Mr. Crabtree, and you're talking to me. Is of minor importance what you told other members during this hearing or what you will tell other members after I ask you some questions. What's of major importance is that when I ask you a question, you answer it. And don't raise your finger to me, good sir. Are you the Assistant Secretary for the United States Department of Energy, Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management?
Yes, sir.
Do you lead and direct the fossil energy and carbon management research and development programs?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So a court, if it's okay with you, is Article 3. It's part of our Constitution. A court makes inquiries and as official statements and writ of the historical record, and part of this court's historical record was reference to the frequently mentioned report here we can't seem to get our hands on. That a second search on Hotel Quebec 2024-02097 Foxtrot was completed in August 2024. The DOE has subsequently identified 97 potentially responsive documents totaling 4,354 pages. Mr. Crabtree, are you aware of the existence of the 4,354 some odd pages referenced by this court document?
Yes, and that those documents were produced.
No, I asked you, are you aware of their existence? That was my
I
question.
can't individually speak to being aware of all those documents.
So who would be aware? Because it's a research document they're referencing. And you stated earlier, you lead the fossil energy and carbon management research and development programs. So life comes down to one guy, and you're the one guy that if you don't know of the existence of 4,354 pages of research material in your office, who should we ask?
Sir, I actually appreciate that you called it research material because that is the type of material that our labs and our team have been producing for various aspects of
Reclaiming
the
my
overall
time.
study.
You run the research and development programs. You just told me you did. Were you incorrect in that assessment?
I did, but if you're asking me if I'm
Well,
personally
there's
aware
no
of all
but.
those documents.
Do
then
you
I
run
can't
the
speak to that.
research and development
Yes,
programs?
sir, I do.
Yes, and these are research documents. Do we concede that point? These
They're analytical documents.
354, they're research documents, 4,354 pages of research documents out of your office. This committee wants those pages. Will you deliver those 4,354 pages to this committee very quickly or not? Will you deliver those pages? We don't care what's in them. You might think it's crazy, but we get to decide what's in them. We get to review the original evidence. So I'm asking you, in your capacity as leader of your office, you have possession of these 4,354 pages of documents. This committee demands them. Will you deliver them or not? Good sir.
Sir, I am not responsible for document production. I will take your request and your insistence back to the team.
What does that mean, take it back to the team?
The team that is responsible for
Will
document
you
production.
submit a request tomorrow that the documents be turned over to this committee?
I will discuss this tomorrow with the team, yes, but I am not involved in that
Can you
process.
identify who the team is?
I'm not going to speak to who's.
What do you mean you're not going to speak to? Are these like CIA members or something?
No, but I'm not
They're
going.
part of your
I'm not going
office,
to
right?
speak to. I'm not going to speak to the individuals that I've interacted
These
with.
individuals that work for you?
No, the
The
document.
individuals that you work for?
The FOIA and document production work is done by a separate part of DOE.
I'm not for you.
I know, I'm just telling you, both are done outside of my office, sir, is
I'm
what I'm saying.
asking you to deliver these 4,354 pages. You have stated under oath before this committee that you will discuss that request with your quote-unquote team tomorrow. We expect these papers. Somebody, Mr. Chairman, got to be held in contempt if we don't get these 4,354 pages of documents. And some of those people may be sitting in this room. I yield.
Chair now recognizes the ranking member for closing remarks.
All right, well, another interesting hearing before the subcommittee. I would suggest that if folks are looking for missing documents, there might be a certain bathroom in southern Florida where a lot of government documents have been illegally stored. Just an idea. It's also interesting to hear that my friends across the aisle are suddenly very concerned about having social media influencers involved in government decision-making. I hope that will extend to the new subcommittee that a certain billionaire social media owner is hoping to intersect with right here in this committee in the coming years. And I am also intrigued to hear that my colleagues are suddenly very concerned about foreign influence over American energy production, given the amount of Russian disinformation we hear daily inside this committee. But I hope these are all positive signs that we're doing real oversight here. I guess time will tell. I would like to ask for unanimous consent to correct the record here. I've got Reuters article from March 28, 2024 that talks about the oil boom under the Biden administration and how it has fueled job production here in the United States.
Would you like to enter that into the record?
Yes, please.
Without objection, so ordered.
All right, so I think it's great to end on a factual note. And I know that the Department of Energy fully plans to, as was stated here today under oath, to release their many-yeared study that is, spans multiple national laboratories, multiple disciplines, multiple models, thousands of documents, research activities in the coming days. And it sounds like there's going to be a robust 60-day comment period during which members of Congress can not only look at under the hood at what is in the study, what went into it, they can get documents associated with it. The industries who are interested in it can make comments on it. The environmental community can make comments on it. So for folks who are interested in this topic, stay tuned. It sounds like Department of Energy is going to release their study in just a few short days. So with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. So we, now recognize myself for a closing statement. We said repeatedly, we heard that this was a brief pause. A brief pause is a few days or even maybe a couple of weeks. It's not a full year. And one of my colleagues asked about what industry discussions occurred before this hearing or what industry discussions occurred to prompt this hearing. Did industry ask for this hearing? I can unequivocally say that there was zero discussions with anyone in industry. This was something that we decided to do. Then I heard the comment, kind of a class warfare, anti-capitalistic comment about, well, we're here to pump up the profits. Well, I would rather have American jobs created and sustained and supported than jobs in Qatar or Russia or Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, et al. I am rooting for American profits. I am rooting for American prosperity. I don't want American poverty. And, you could definitely have done, Mr. Crabtree, this study while also approving new export permits. You could have done both. You didn't have to do, it wasn't an either or scenario. They didn't need to be mutually exclusive. And then we heard about, well, we have record highs of energy production. A lot of this happens, what we produce today is because of policies that were set in place 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 7 years ago. There is a lag time that needs to be mentioned. And it takes years, and there is a ripple effect. And then for someone of your stature, Mr. Crabtree, to say that a year-long pause has no impact is inane, and it's fatuous. I mean, it's really remarkable that you made that claim. And I think on November 5th, the American people made it very clear that they were tired of an administration playing politics with their future. Enough is enough. When we have members of other nation states and allies come into our office unprompted and beg us to see if there's anything that we can do to have this pause ban lifted, it's really telling. And it's chilling that the president didn't even know, it wasn't seemingly aware of the impact of this pause. And we've seen unnecessary damage done by this administration across industries, especially the energy sector, by leftists that want to demonize energy production. We're not in a situation where we can go completely renewable. I know that that's what they teach these young kids in college campuses, but it's not factual. We are where we are. And then to have the President of the United States at a State of the Union address say that we may need fossil fuels 10 years from now is, again, ludicrous and to the extreme. Now, we'll see what happens 10 years from now. No, there's really never a discussion either on nuclear energy with folks that are on the political left. If you want to talk about reducing carbon emissions, I think that's a discussion that we really should have, if we're serious about this, or if it's just trying to pollute young minds into voting a certain way. So what did this thing serve? It certainly didn't serve Mr. Higgins' district and the energy workers in Louisiana, and wondering why their paychecks are, they're going to have a paycheck, a steady one, after these stalled LNG exports on the Gulf Coast. And it didn't serve mother in Texas, who works multiple jobs to afford her family's bills when energy prices inevitably rise during the winter. Who will it really serve is leftist climate activists so they can feel good about themselves at cocktail parties that they're doing something good when they're not. They're causing far more harm. American families, suffer when we're not dealing with the realities on the ground. But there is good news. America rejected these policies last month, and we're on a cusp of a new era, I believe, in global energy leadership under President-elect Trump. I think what we will see, not only in the next 4 years, but in the next decade plus, is a renaissance of American energy. And the incoming administration has vowed to end this political nonsense and return common sense policies that benefit all Americans. And the value of LNG exports provide our economy and the energy sector of our allies. I mean, it's synergistic, and it does create a boost, and it can't be overstated. The U.S. is uniquely situated. We've been blessed by history to meet our energy needs at home while at the same time maintaining a strategic advantage of supplying the world with clean, affordable energy. And the more energy that we can produce, we do it cleaner, and export to our allies, it really does put us in a position, former Secretary of State Pompeo was saying when he would negotiate with other nation states and his counterparts and heads of state, it gave him more leverage because we have what people need. And that's, it's all interrelated. And a recent study published in the Sustainable Chemistry and Energy, they found that the American LNG delivered to Europe had a greenhouse gas intensity 22 to 53% lower than previous studies, meaning that previous assessments overestimated the environmental impacts. I'd like to enter this study into the record so our colleagues at the DOE may review these findings, and without objection, so ordered. In the coming years, the world is going to continue to need more energy, not less. And the American people know this because they're living with the impacts of these short-sighted decisions every day. Mr. Crabtree, I am sorry that this administration has put you in a position to have to defend policies that are not in the best interest of the country. It's a failure at the highest level, and the energy industry will not soon forget the harm done by your colleagues. As the 118th Congress soon comes to a close, we have an opportunity to turn the page on the last 4 years and put the interests of the United States front and center once again. America is blessed with an abundance of resources to fulfill our future energy needs, as well as those of our allies, and a workforce is eager to make this possible. The incoming Trump administration is committed to supporting energy workers, both in my home state of Texas and across the country, New Mexico included. And I look forward to the next 4 years ahead. With that, and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials, to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, or in this case, the witness, unfortunately, which will be forwarded to the witness for his response. If there is no further business, without objection, the subcommittee shall stand adjourned.